Elena Ward built her reputation on steadiness. For nearly 20 years, she sat beneath studio lights at the fictional National Broadcast Network, delivering tragedy and triumph with the same measured clarity. Viewers trusted her because she never appeared shaken. Hurricanes, elections, international crises. Her voice held the same grounded cadence. Off-camera, producers joked that Elena didn't have an off switch. She was composed even during commercial breaks. At 51, she was considered the emotional backbone of the network's flagship evening program. What few people understood was that composure had never been a personality trait. It was training. It was inheritance. It was survival. Long before she faced breaking news alerts, she had learned at home that tears complicated things, that fear distracted others, and that strength was not just admirable. It was required. The woman behind the standard. Elena's mother, Margaret Ward, had raised 3 children alone after her husband's early death. In their quiet Ohio town, Margaret became a symbol of perseverance. She worked double shifts at the hospital, attended every school recital, and never allowed financial strain to show. But affection in their home was subtle and often conditional. Praise followed achievement. Silence followed emotional displays. When Elena once cried before a debate competition, Margaret had taken her aside and whispered, "The world doesn't reward softness." It wasn't cruel. It was practical. Margaret believed she was equipping her daughter for reality. Over time, Elena internalized that message so thoroughly that vulnerability began to feel like failure. By adulthood, she could moderate a national political argument with ease, yet struggled to tell her own mother she felt overwhelmed. The call that shattered routine. The disruption came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Elena was reviewing a segment on healthcare reform when her phone vibrated with an unknown number from Ohio. The voice on the other end was a neighbor from her childhood street. Margaret had not answered her door for 2 days. Her car was still in the driveway. Curtains drawn. Mail untouched. Elena felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. Not panic exactly, but the sensation of losing narrative control. Within hours, she arranged a flight home, informing her executive producer only that it was a family matter. On air that evening, she remained precise and articulate. Off air, she packed a small bag with trembling hands she refused to acknowledge were shaking. Returning to a smaller world, stepping back into her childhood home felt like walking into preserved time. The wallpaper remained unchanged, the hallway photos undisturbed. Margaret's absence was louder than any sign of struggle. There was no forced entry, no chaos, just stillness. Police treated it initially as a wellness check, cautious but calm. Elena found herself narrating details aloud, as if framing them for a segment. No signs of disturbance, timeline unclear. The officers exchanged glances. This wasn't a broadcast. It was her mother. Yet distancing language felt safer than grief. In Margaret's bedroom, Eleanor noticed a small locked drawer she had never seen opened. She didn't break it. Not yet. Some part of her feared what discovering more might mean. Not about a crime, but about a woman she realized she had never fully understood. Strength as performance. Back in New York, the network urged Elena to take leave. She refused. Reporting anchored her. During a commercial break, veteran correspondent Daniel Reeves approached quietly. Daniel had known Elena for years, long enough to recognize the subtle stiffness in her posture. "You don't have to carry it alone," he said gently. The comment unsettled her more than any newsroom crisis. Carrying things alone was the blueprint. At home, emotion had been managed privately, never displayed publicly. On set, that discipline became professional currency. Viewers admired her resilience. Ratings rewarded it. But Daniel's observation lingered. Was she strong, or simply practiced at concealment? And if something truly devastating happened, would she know how to respond without a script? Uncovering the private chapters. A week later, Elena returned to Ohio after police expanded their inquiry. Margaret had been located safe at a nearby rehabilitation center after collapsing during a volunteer shift and declining to notify family. She insisted she didn't want to cause a fuss. The revelation stirred conflicting emotions: relief, frustration, tenderness. At the house, Elena finally opened the locked drawer. Inside were journals spanning 20 years. They detailed exhaustion Margaret had never voiced, loneliness she masked with busyness, and pride in Elena that she rarely articulated directly. "She is stronger than I ever was," one entry read. Elena sat on the bedroom floor, realizing that her mother's silence had not been indifference. It had been fear of burdening her children. The cost of composure. Reading those pages reframed everything. Margaret had not withheld softness because she lacked it. She withheld it because she believed vulnerability would destabilize the family. The lesson had transferred intact to Eleanor, who now shielded millions of viewers from her own human fluctuations. Generational resilience can become generational armor. The very quality that protects a family during crisis can quietly prevent intimacy. Elena began to question how many relationships she had kept at professional distance. How often had she chosen polished responses over honest ones? Even her colleagues knew her as dependable first, relatable second. The realization wasn't dramatic. It was slow and uncomfortable, like recognizing a habit so ingrained it feels indistinguishable from identity. A conversation without scripts. One evening in the rehabilitation center's courtyard, Elena finally asked her mother a question without rehearsing it. "Why didn't you tell us you were struggling?" Margaret looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Because you were flying," she said softly, "and I didn't want you looking back." The answer held no accusation, only love shaped by sacrifice. Elena admitted she often felt she was still trying to prove something, that strength equaled worth. Margaret reached for her hand, a gesture rare but steady. "You don't have to prove endurance to me," she said. "You already survived more than I wanted you to." It was the first time they acknowledged openly how survival had shaped them both. Redefining strength on air. When Elena returned to the anchor desk full-time, viewers noticed a subtle shift. During a segment on caregiver burnout, she spoke with unusual softness about families who feel compelled to appear unbreakable. She did not mention her mother by name. She did not dramatize her experience. But she allowed a brief pause after describing emotional fatigue, and in that pause was humanity. Daniel later remarked that the broadcast felt different, not less authoritative, but more dimensional. Strength had not disappeared. It had expanded. Elena realized composure did not require erasure of feeling. It required balance. The legacy they choose. Margaret eventually returned home, accepting more help than before. Elena visited more often, not out of crisis but intention. Their conversations grew less guarded. The mythology of the invincible single mother slowly dissolved into something gentler. Two women shaped by hardship, learning to speak plainly. Elena understood now that legacy is not just what we inherit, but what we revise. She could honor her mother's endurance without replicating her silence. In the quiet after one visit, she reflected that true strength might not be the absence of visible fracture, but the willingness to be seen repairing. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that breaking, when it happens, does not mean failing.